For this video, we are going to be walking through the basic rules for the game, The Dungeon of the Beast.
Ta-da!
Hello gamers, Matthew here from Grey Army Gaming. I am extremely excited to introduce these basic rules for our game, The Dungeon of the Beast. Now there will be future videos in which I introduce more advanced rules, more specifically dealing with characters and monsters, but what we're going to do right now is run through some of the basic things you need to get started with this game. Moreover, I'm hoping to be able to produce and release a free PDF version of these rules. If you're interested in this kind of content, you would like to see a free PDF come out or more videos explaining this game, then please do like this video and subscribe to the channel so that I know that there's enough interest to move forward with that project. So with that said, let's go ahead and walk through the basic rules, starting with setup, then victory conditions, entering the dungeon, hero actions, monster actions, combat, searching, moving to the next room, and then the final boss. The most important part of the setup is going to be this, the dungeon itself. This will be a dungeon consisting of 6 total rooms, and each of the rooms will now have dimensions of 6 by 6. The reason we have those dimensions is because we are going to be using a D6 die in order to roll off coordinates for our items, for our monsters, and for the torch. If you notice here now, I have alternated between black and gray in order to differentiate the rooms from one another. You can use whatever color scheme you want. You could use a dark gray, a light gray, but the most important thing is to make sure that you see that there's a difference between the rooms so that you don't confuse the rooms or mix up the borders of the rooms. Now, a lot of these pieces I've used 6 by 6 plates. You don't have to use that for all of them. You can use smaller pieces as well. But you notice here on the two ends, these are really important pieces here. You're going to have to use smaller pieces because in the very corner here, you see there's a brown 1 by 1 piece. That is going to be our entry door to the dungeon. And up here on the top, you see there's a 1 by 1 brown piece as well. That is going to be the exit of the dungeon. The rest of the doors we will find as we make our way through the dungeon in this direction, in this order. But these two are important to note right away from the beginning. Make sure you build them into your dungeon to begin with. Like I said, the construction is very simple. You just need to have these 6 by 6 rooms, 6 of them total, and then reinforce it somehow on the bottom. I just went with 2 rows to give it a little bit of extra strength when I'm playing the game. The second part of setup is going to be the chart. Now, you don't need to make this, but I think it's just really fun to have this made out of Lego. It's a simple reference chart that I will be using during the game. If you look here on the left side, the red represent the rolls on the D6 from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And what you will do then when you need to make a roll, you will just use this chart and follow out the corresponding row to see what the result is going to be. The next column over here represents the items that you're able to find when you make a search. So if you roll a 1, you will find 1 gold piece. If you roll a 2, you will find 2 gold pieces. A 3 will be a trap. 4 will be a trap and a gold piece. 5 will be a healing potion. And a 6 will represent the Jewel of Araneth. If we look all the way to the right now, you see these black dots, and these represent the number of monsters that are in the room when you enter it. So, for example, if you roll a 1, there will be 1 monster, a 2 will be 1 monster, 3, 4 will be 2 monsters, and 5 or 6 will be 3 monsters. This is going to be the standard distribution for monsters that I'm using for the solo game. You can always change this if you want to make things more difficult or make things easier. So, for example, if you want to make it easier, you can go ahead and add some of these dots in order to cover up the results so that you make them, in fact, a lot easier. So if we went like this, for example, you would see that we are on a roll of a 1 to a 4, we would only have 1 monster in the dungeon. A roll of a 5 or a 6 would be 2 monsters. In my playtesting, however, I have found that the distribution between 1 and 3 monsters is just about right for solo play. For the third step in the setup, you are going to want to build what I am calling character sheets. Now, I have created many different characters for this game. I have created a ranger, I have created a rogue, a wizard, and a barbarian. For this example, I will show you the ranger, what you see before you, and in future videos, I will walk through the specifics of the other characters. Each character sheet will have the same information on it that you will need in order to play this game. Let's begin here. You notice we have two avatars. We will take one of these avatars off, the one here on the bottom, and place that into the dungeon. The second avatar will remain on our character sheet so that we remember which character sheet it is that we are playing. The top row of the character sheet represents the character's weapon skill, which is the character's ability to hit on a d6 roll. No character will have all 6 of these filled because there is always a possibility that a character will miss. Let's use this example of the ranger to explain how this works. You see here with the ranger we have 4 of these opaque yellow dots and we have 1 transparent dot. And the reason for that is because there's a difference for the ranger between hand-to-hand combat and shooting combat, so ranged attacks. The ranger is much better at ranged attacks than hand-to-hand combat. So let's show you what I mean here. We have a weapon skill of 4 in hand-to-hand combat, which means on a roll of a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on a d6, I will hit. However, if the ranger is shooting from a distance with ranged attacks, then the weapon skill is increased to 5, which means with an arrow, with a shot from a distance, I will hit on a roll of a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Hits will lead to automatic wounds unless the opponent is able to make an armor save. So let's go ahead and explain armor saves right now. The second row of the character sheet represents armor. There are 2 kinds of armor: light armor, which is 1 silver dot, or heavy armor, which is 2 silver dots. In this case of the ranger, we have light armor. Now what this means is that if a hit goes through from the opponent, I would then be able to roll for an armor save. On a 1, I would prevent all the damage from that attack. Were I to have heavy armor, I would have 2 dots here, which means that I would be able to make a save on a roll of a 1 or a 2. Armor and movement are interconnected, which makes sense. The heavier armor that you have, the slower that you will move. Some of our characters, for example, the rogue, has no armor at all, and the rogue is also stealthy, so the rogue has a base movement of 6. If we look here at our ranger, we have a base movement of 5, and that is what this brown dot represents. I've taken away 1 point of movement. In addition, however, though, our ranger is wearing light armor, which means we lose 1 more point of movement, which leaves us a total of 4 movement. One of the actions you can take during your turn instead of attacking is what we are calling the dash action. In this case, that will allow you 3 additional dots of movement. We'll return to that rule in a little bit. The third row of the character sheet with the red dots represents your character's total hit points. Now, were your character to suffer a hit, and were your character unable to make an armor save, you would then suffer 1 wound from that attack, removing 1 hit point from your character. Were your character to suffer the final wound on the character sheet, your character would then be killed. In a solo game, your game would be over. In a cooperative game, the other player or players would have to continue on their own. If during the game your character has found a healing potion and were your character to consume that healing potion, your character would immediately gain back 1 hit point. The final 2 rows of the character sheet represent the special abilities that are specific to your character. Now, these will be different for each of the characters. So the wizard will have spells down there. The barbarian will have raging and rage runs there. The rogue will have invisibility spells and traps. And the ranger here will have long range and short range arrows. In this case, 6 of each. The specifics of these particular abilities will be explained in more detail in an upcoming video on characters and monsters. The right portion of the character sheet represents the areas where you will place your items as you move towards obtaining your victory conditions. So for example, here on the top, you will be placing your gold that you gather in these dots. On solo mode, you will need to collect a total of 12 gold. If you are playing cooperatively with another player, then each of you will need to collect a total of 8 gold. At the bottom left is where you will place the Jewel of Araneth when you find it, and to the right, this is the place where you will set your torch that you find in each room. A fourth part of the setup is to build yourself some monsters and some monster stat blocks. Here's an example of the orcs and goblins. Monster stat blocks work very similarly to the character sheets. So if you look here in the first row, you see that most of the orcs and goblins have a weapon skill of 3. That means they will hit on a roll of 1, 2, or 3. The boss, the final boss over here, however, has a weapon skill of 4, which means that the boss will hit on a 1, 2, 3, or 4. All of our orcs and goblins and the boss have light armor, which means that were you to hit them, they would be able to save from any damage on a roll of a 1. Instead of wounds represented by red dots, our monsters' wounds will be represented by the number of dots on top of their bodies. So you see here, most of the orcs and goblins here have 2 wounds. Our boss will have a total of 5 wounds. So were you to connect with the monster and cause a wound, you would simply remove one of the dots from the head. The second wound caused in this case would then remove the orc from play. The fifth and final part of setup is to gather together all the materials that you're going to need for the game. Now, you don't have to do it like I did it in putting all these materials on a single plate, but I find this extremely helpful because all the materials I will need are in one place, and when I'm finished with them, I can put them back onto the plate. I'm going to explain what all these things are in a little bit here, but I can just mention briefly what they are. Over here to the right, we have our lava. Here we have our room blocks, both singles and doubles. Up on top here, we have traps in both gray and black. I have 2 colors so that they show up better on my floor that is both black and gray. Here we have a big pile of gold, which is things that we're going to find or receive when we kill monsters. Here we have the Jewel of Araneth, which is what we are trying to find. That's the main item we're looking for in the dungeon. Here we have different doors. When we are going to be moving into the next room, we will have to place a door. Here we have places that we have set our potions of healing and a few extra wound markers if we lose some or need them. Victory conditions for the game are simple, and they are shown here clearly on the character sheets. First of all, you'll need to collect the required gold to pay your guides to get you here and also to get you home. When you're playing solo mode, you'll need a total of 12 gold. If you're playing cooperative with 2 people, each of you will need to gather a total of 8 gold. In addition, you will need to find the Jewel of Araneth. If you're playing solo mode, there's only 1 jewel that needs to be found. If you're playing cooperative, you'll need to find 2 jewels. So there are 2 jewels of Araneth out there. Third, you will need to slay the beast in the final room, and the beast will always be located in the 6th and final room. Once you slay the beast, you will have the key to be able to get out of the final door in the dungeon. And you will also need to survive the dungeon's monsters. If you're able to take your way through the dungeon, to find your gold, to find the jewel, to slay the beast, then you will have defeated the game. In addition to the large victory conditions, there are also minor objectives that you will have to complete in order to make your way through the dungeon. Before you are able to search a room for items, you first need to pick up the torch in that room. Once you find the torch, you are able then to search the room, but you're only able to do this before the room is cleared, which means when all the monsters are killed or the monsters have been trapped, you are no longer able to search the room. So searching will always happen in a stressful situation where monsters are bearing down on you and attacking you. Let's go ahead and walk through the order of play. The first thing that you want to do is to select a character, take that character's avatar, and place that character on the initial door entering the dungeon. The next step now is to set up the dungeon room that you have entered. The first thing you will do is to roll a d6, and that will be the number of dots worth of walls that you'll incorporate into the room. So that will be 5 total dots of walls. Feel free to do this however you would like. For this example, I'm just going to take 2 doubles, which would be 4, plus a single. So that would be my 5 dots of walls. Once you have your walls picked out, go ahead and place them into the dungeon room in any configuration that you want. Just make it cool, make it epic, make it interesting, any way that you want to set it up. The only rule, however, is that you are not allowed to build in a way that would leave an area cut off from the rest of the room. There must always be a passageway that would allow you to get around the room to the different spaces. Once you have placed your walls, you can then go and pick out the lava that you will add to the dungeon. Now, the rule for lava is simple. Any number that you roll, you should add lava up to 6. So, for example, were I to roll a 1 and only have one wall, well, then I would have 5 squares of lava. Were I to roll a 4, I would have 2 squares of lava. In our case, we rolled a 5, so we have 1 dot of lava. Just like with walls, feel free to place the lava wherever you like. Just find an interesting place to put it down. The next step now is to roll for the placement of the torch. In each dungeon room, you will have to grab the torch if you want to search, and the torch lasts just long enough for you to make it out of the room. So in each of the rooms, you'll have to search for the torch anew. To find out where the torch is, we will have to roll 2 dice, or you can roll a single d6 twice. The first one, in this case the blue one, will be the column, and the green one will be the row. So let's go ahead and roll this off to see where the torch is, and it is 1-1. We will always begin here on the left and moving over and then down. So were we to roll 5-2, it would be 5-2. This would be the placement for the torch. We, however, rolled 1-1, which means that the torch will be located up here in the far corner. With the torch in all items, were there to be a conflict of placement, whether it is a wall or it is lava or it is another character or another item, you would just jump to the next row lower. So for example, if we rolled 2-2, which would be on top of this wall, we would just simply move to the next space down. So in other words, it would be 2-3. Because we rolled 1-1, we'll just leave our torch over here in this far corner. And this is going to make it difficult for our character because our character will have to make his way all the way over here before the character can make any searches in the room. The next step now is to roll off for the number of monsters and the placement of the monsters. In the initial 5 rooms, it will be the simple monsters that will be in those rooms. The boss, the beast monster, will be only in the 6th and final room. To determine the number of monsters in the dungeon, let's roll a d6 and consult our chart. A 2 will be a single monster. And rolling for the coordinates of the monster. 2, 5. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, placing the monster behind the wall. With that, the room is now set up with the walls, with the lava, with the torch, and the monsters. At this point now, gameplay will begin, and it will always start with the hero or the heroes taking the first action. On its turn, your character is able now to take one action and make its movement up to its full number of squares. Now, what's cool about this game is that you can take your movement at any time. If you want to go 1 square and take an action and take 3 more, then you can do that. If you want to take all your movement and then an action, you can do that. If you want to take your action and then take all your movement, you can do that. If you don't want to move at all, you don't have to. It's entirely up to you. Movement can happen at any time, and you are allowed 1 action. There are 3 actions you can have in this game. The first action is attacking. The second action is searching if you possess the torch. And the third action is the dash action, which allows you 3 extra spaces of movement. In the case of my character, I am far away from that torch. So what I think I want to do is to take my 4 spaces of movement. Remember, I have light armor and I have a base movement of 5. So that drops me down to 4 movement. But for my action, I'm going to take the dash action, which means I am given 7 spaces of movement. Following my turn, we will then move on to the monster turn. If we go back to the monster stat sheet, remember that they have light armor, the orcs and goblins, which means that their movement is a movement of 5. 5 movement will be just enough for that orc to be able to come into base-to-base contact with me. A couple important points about movement. For friendly characters, you are able to move through spaces where your friendly characters are standing without any penalty. You are, however, unable to move through enemies. That is not a possible move. Unlike characters, enemies are not able to move through one another's spaces. So they can neither move through one another's space, nor can they move through an enemy's space. Moreover, movement can only happen in a left or a right, up or down fashion. It is not possible to move diagonally. Once a character or monster has come into base-to-base contact with an enemy, it is possible to attack. Now, base-to-base contact can be when you're facing each other in this way, but it can also be when you're facing each other diagonally. So essentially, the orc could attack at any point in which the orc is around your character. The only exception to attacking diagonally is this case when you are attacking diagonally around a wall. In this case, our character would be protected by the corner of the wall and the orc would not be able to attack. Having come into base-to-base contact, the orc is now able to strike. To see if we hit, we look at the monster stat and we see here a weapon skill of 3. So we are hitting on a 1, 2, or a 3. Hitting on a 1, 2, or 3. And that is a 3, that is a hit. Had I rolled a 4, 5, or a 6, then the attack would have missed and the orc's turn would be over. The turn would be over, that is, of course, if the orc doesn't have any movement left and doesn't want to use any more movement. The orc connects, and now I go back to my character sheet and remember that I have a light armor, so I'm able to make a save on a 1. And that's a 5. I did not save the attack, so I suffer 1 wound. That brings us to the end of the first round, and now we go back to my character and we begin round 2. My character is able to take a turn. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my movement of 4, which will bring me right over to the torch, and I'm going to go pick up the torch. So I will move 1, 2, 3, 4. Meaning that I claim the torch. And I can go ahead and place the torch on my character sheet to know that I have it. It is only when I have claimed the torch that I am now able to search the room for items. In addition, I can only search a room when the room is not cleared of monsters. We still have one orc that is active, that is not dead or trapped, so I can now search the room. I will use my action to wave around my torch and see if I pick up any items anywhere in the room. To see what I find, I will roll a d6 and consult the chart. A roll of a 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 will be 1 trap and 1 gold piece. Before placing these items, I can just briefly mention how the items in general are placed. When you have 1 gold piece, you roll off for the coordinates for that gold piece and you place that gold piece down. When you have 2 gold pieces, you do the same thing for each of them, placing them in different places. A trap you can place anywhere that you desire, and it's a trap that everybody can see. It's not an invisible trap. When you roll a 4, you can place the trap wherever you want, and then you have to roll off the coordinates for the gold piece. A 5 will give you a healing potion, and that needs to be rolled for coordinates. And a 6 will give you the jewel, and you will have to roll for coordinates for that as well. So basically, you are always going to be rolling for coordinates for items, except for the traps, which you can place wherever you want. Let's begin with the coordinates for the gold piece. And that will be 5, 2. 5 over and 2 down will put the gold piece right next to the monster. So let's go ahead and just move this block here, this wall, for a second. We'll put our gold piece down and we'll put the wall back in place. It's important to note here that monsters will never pick up items, so those items will be secure and safe there until you get to them. Now I can place the trap wherever I want, so I'm going to put it right up here, blocking the path between the monster and me. A quick note about traps. Any character or monster that moves into a trap will immediately spring the trap. This means that the trap will immediately be removed, and any character or monster that went into the trap will suffer 1 wound and will lose all remaining movement. So in other words, you are stuck in place and you take a point of damage. So I've now laid the trap here, cutting off this passageway towards me. At this point, we should say something about how you play opponents in solo and cooperative mood. Now, opponents will always take the most aggressive action, which means they are always trying to get into base-to-base contact with you and attack you. Opponents, however, are not stupid. They are not going to sacrifice themselves for no reason. So, this orc will not move forward into the trap and lose his movement and 1 life if he is fully able to achieve his goal of getting into base-to-base contact by moving around and using his 5 movement to come into base-to-base contact. However, were you to set up the situation in this way, that there are traps surrounding you on both sides, well, then the orc would in fact be forced to take the most aggressive action, moving into the trap, setting off the trap, losing his movement, and losing 1 wound. But in the situation that we have now, the orc does not need to sacrifice himself in the trap, so he is able to use his 5 movement and come around here into base-to-base contact with me, at which point he will then go ahead and carry out an attack. At this point, we can mention something about attacks of opportunity. In this game, there are no such thing as attacks of opportunities, which means that you're able to leave combat at any point without being attacked. You're able to move past enemies without them being able to get an attack off on you. Now, why is this important? Well, for several reasons. Partly because you may at points in the game want to flee and to run, and you can do that without suffering massive consequences. But also in the case of the ranger, remember that his weapon skill in hand-to-hand combat is only 4. But if he is shooting with ranged weapons, his weapon skill is 5. So for him, it may be strategic to pull away from a hand-to-hand combat in order to shoot off an arrow at his enemy. Eventually, in this room, you will come to a point where you clear the room. Clearing the room means either of 2 things. Either you have killed the final monster, or you have been able to trap the final monster or monsters such that they are not able to move and attack you any longer. The wizard is able to cast spells, creating walls of crystal, and in that case, the wizard is able to trap monsters. Once the room is cleared, then you are able to collect any items that you have not picked up, just add them directly to your character sheet, and then you can begin to look for the door to the next room. Moreover, for each monster that is killed, you gain 1 gold. So in the case that I kill this final monster, I would gain 1 gold for that monster, plus I'd be able to pick up this other gold that is over here. Thus, after the first room, I am moving towards my victory conditions. I have not found the Jewel of Araneth yet, but I have added 2 gold out of the 12 that I need to pay my guides. At any point in the game, even before you've cleared the room, you're able to search for the door to the next room. The way you do this is you move to the wall where the door will be located, and then you have to use an action to search. And go ahead and roll a d6 to find out the position of the door. 4. 4 is convenient because that is the square on which I am already standing. So let's count down 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll place the door there and place my character back on this side of the door. And then I'm able to move into the next room and begin the whole process of rolling off for the structure of the room with walls, lava, torch, and monsters. With respect to your movement through the dungeon rooms, you will be snaking your way through the rooms in a very specific order. So, for example, from the first room, you will be moving west into the second room. From the second room, you will head north into the third room. In the third room, you will be heading east into the fourth room. From the fourth room, you'll be heading north into the fifth room. And from the fifth room, you will be heading west into the sixth room. With respect to moving through rooms, an important question is, am I able to move back into rooms that I have already been in? The answer to that is yes, you're able to move into rooms, but only if you still need to collect items and resources. So, for example, if I need more gold and I'm moving into the sixth room and I haven't found enough gold yet, I am able to move back into another room, potentially in order to find more gold. You are not able to move into rooms, however, if you don't like the setup. So for example, if I move into this room and I do not like the setup, let's say I rolled for 3 orcs and there are 3 monsters in here and I don't like that. I'd rather only fight 1 monster. I'm not able to move back into this room again so that I can come back once more and roll and reset it. That's not a possibility. You have to accept the room as it is, unless, of course, you need to move back and get other items. Once you move back into a room, the room will remain exactly as you left it. What you need to do then is to roll off for the new torch and to roll off for the number and placement of enemies. And then you can go ahead and operate in the room like normal. Eventually, you will be making your way to the 6th and final room, and this is the room in which you will encounter the final boss. Just like all of the rooms, you will roll for the setup, and I have already put down the walls and the lava. In addition, you will also roll for the torch, and then you will also roll for the number of enemies. The only difference here is that one of the enemies must be the final boss, the beast. So if you roll for 3 enemies, you will have 2 normal ones and you will have the beast. If you roll for 2, you'll have 1 normal one and the beast. If you only roll for 1 enemy, it will just be the beast. Roll for the coordinates as normal and place the beast into play. If there are any other monsters, roll off for their coordinates and place them into play as well. If you have made it through the entire dungeon and in your searches you have never rolled a 6, which is the Jewel of Araneth, this jewel will now be placed in the 6th and final room. If earlier in the dungeon you have found the jewel, then the jewel will be removed from the chart. And what this means now is that on a roll of a 5, you will still get a healing potion, but on a roll of a 6, you will get a gold and a healing potion. But let us go back to our 6th and final room. If you have not yet found the Jewel of Araneth, then you will roll off for the coordinates for that as well and place that on the board. With some good fighting skills, eventually you will kill both the monster and the beast. And once the beast is killed, you will be given the key that will allow you now to open this final door. So once the room is cleared, you're able to collect the jewel and add that to your character sheet. In addition, in this case, we would get 2 more gold. If that's enough gold and you have 12 gold to be able to pay your guides, you're able now to move to the final door in the dungeon and to leave the dungeon, successfully beating the game. If, however, you pick up the jewel but you do not have enough gold, you will have to go back into the dungeon, into this room or another room in the dungeon, in order to fight more monsters and search for more gold, in order to fill your quota of 12 gold on a solo game and 8 each on a cooperative game, in order to pay your guides. Upon entering the 6th room again, though, the beast is already slain, so there will be no beast in the room this time around. Still, you will have to roll off for the number of monsters and their placement, but if you are able to, you can run past them and escape through the door. A couple important notes about movement. As we mentioned, some characters are able to move 6 squares. Some characters, however, are only allowed 5 base movement or 4. In addition, armor will reduce your movement by 1 for light armor, and it will reduce your movement by 2 for heavy armor. It is always possible to move through lava, but in doing so, a character will suffer 1 point of damage by moving through it. Moreover, if you begin your turn in lava for some reason, you would immediately take 1 point of damage. In addition, if an enemy or you is thrown into lava, and we will discuss the throw move in 1 second, if you are thrown into lava by a character or an enemy, you immediately also take 1 point of damage. With respect to traps, it is similar ideas here. If you move into a trap, you will suffer 1 damage, and immediately the trap is removed and your movement is over. If you're thrown into a trap, the trap will be sprung and you will also take 1 point of damage. However, what's interesting with traps is that as characters, you are either able to fire at a trap from a distance and thus spring it, Or if you move next to it, you're able to use your action and to swing a weapon at it and to spring the trap without any negative effects to you. Enemies, however, do not use actions to spring traps, and they will always be using the most aggressive movement to get into base-to-base contact with you. So in this case, they will have to go through a trap and set the trap off and suffer a point of damage. A reminder that when playing a co-op game, you're able to move through the space of friendly characters, but you are unable to move through the spaces of enemies. For the enemies, however, they are able to move neither through spaces of enemies nor of friendly monsters. As one of your actions, as we mentioned already, you are able to take a dash, which means you get your base movement plus 3 additional spaces. So in this case, I would get 4 plus 3 would be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And finally, as we mentioned about monsters, they are not stupid, but if they have no other option, they will take an aggressive action that will potentially hurt or kill them. So in this case, we have only a single wound left with this monster. The monster needs to get into base-to-base contact to attack, so the monster on its turn will in fact move into the lava, suffering 1 wound and removing it from play. At that point, a piece of gold will land right here where the monster was killed, which means that if I want to pick that gold up, I will have to suffer a point of damage to go into the lava to get it. A few brief notes on shooting and spells. In order to successfully hit with shooting and spells ranged attacks, you will need line of sight. So you see with this case of the ranger, I do have line of sight on the orc. Were the orc, however, to be hidden behind this wall, over here I would not have line of sight, which means that I would have to use some of my movement in order to try to get into a position where I have line of sight. To hit, you will simply roll on your weapon skill. In the case of the ranger, it is a weapon skill of 5, so I hit on a roll of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. With respect to the wizard, which we'll explain in another video, you have a weapon skill of 5 when you are shooting spells off. So you would also hit with a spell on a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Whether you hit or not with an arrow or a spell, you will immediately lose that particular arrow or spell that you used. With respect to armor saves, enemies are able to make armor saves for arrows, but not for spells. A few reminders about combat. In order for combat to happen, you need to be in base-to-base contact with an enemy. Now, base-to-base can be perpendicular, but also diagonal to an enemy. It's possible to attack diagonally, except when your opponent is around a corner. Now, were you to hit on your weapon skill, then normally you would deal 1 damage, 1 wound. An armor save is possible on that as well. Were you to kill your opponent, immediately you would find 1 gold where the opponent was standing. If it is possible for you to pick that up uninhibited, you can immediately add that gold to your character sheet. And also there is a move that is called a throw that is entirely possible. What you do for a throw is that you roll off a normal attack for hand-to-hand combat, and were you successful, let's say I'm attacking this orc, I am able to throw the orc in any one of the spaces around me. And ideally I would want to throw that orc into the lava here, which means that the orc would immediately suffer 1 point of damage now, and when he begins his turn, immediately another point of damage. So that would essentially take him out of commission. A quick note with respect to the difficulty differences when you're playing solo versus 2-player cooperative mode. On a solo mode, your monsters will typically have 1 to 2 wounds. I have set most of the monsters with 2 wounds. Your beast will have 3 to 5 wounds, and I have set the beast oftentimes with 5 wounds. On solo mode, you'll need to collect 12 gold and 1 jewel of Araneth. On 2-player cooperative mode, I set the monsters to 3 wounds. I set the beast to 7 wounds, and I have them pick up 8 gold each for a total of 16 gold, plus 2 jewels of Araneth instead of just 1. With respect to characters, in the development of the game thus far, I've come up with 4 basic character types. Over here we have the wizard. Over here we have the barbarian. Here we have the Ranger, which is what we have been using in the examples today. And over here we have the Rogue. Each of these 4 character types have very special abilities, and I hope to cover all of them in a forthcoming video. I'm sure there will be many more types of characters that will be coming out in the future, but it is these basic 4 that we will be beginning with. Well, there you have it, folks. A quick run through of some of the basic rules for our game, The Dungeon of the Beast. If you're interested in seeing more content like this in the future, videos covering characters, videos covering gameplay, and if you're interested in seeing a free PDF of the rules come out, then please do give me a thumbs up to this video, subscribe to the channel, and if there's enough interest, I will continue pushing this project forward in the future. And most importantly, thank you for joining us here today at Grey Army Gaming for the future of gaming.